Morning, folks. MikesMMAPicks here. Well, what you could consider a fairly competitive card. We got a lot of fights that are closely lined. This is UFC on ESPN Plus, Wichita. We have 13 fights. Something that stuck out to me pretty early was a lot of these fights are very, very closely lined. To put things in perspective, currently the biggest underdog on the card sits at plus 205. That would be Maurice Greene. I don't expect him to pull it off. Let's start from the top. We're going to be talking Draftkings and some picks, hopefully picking some winners here. First fight on the card, we have Alex White against Dan Moretti. Dan Moretti, 32 years old, 7,600 on Draftkings. Grappler, was last seen in the octagon, knocked out by Gilbert Burns, who is also a high-end jiu-jitsu practitioner, taking on Alex White, who comes in at minus 140, 8,600 on the board for Draftkings. This is one of those cards where I think the mid-range is going to win you a lot of money if you're playing Draftkings. So take that into consideration. Alex White, he is one-trick pony, knockout or bust. We've seen when he was fighting Kraus that he doesn't have a plan B. He's got heavy hands, busted up Kraus in that fight and still lost the decision. Dan Moretti is going to have to win this fight by grappling, which he could do. Big risk when you're trying to roster fighters on Draftkings and you're shitting the bed the first fight of the night. So be careful putting your eggs in one basket for Alex White. I do see him coming through with a knockout in this fight. Looked great on the scales. Always looks pretty good on the scales. But that loss to Jim Miller. Jim Miller's on the tail end of his career, and that's a stinging loss for Alex White. So I'm going to pick Alex White to win the first fight here. Next up, we have Alex Morono coming in at minus 175 on the betting line at 9,100 from a Draftkings perspective, coming off of a fresh win against Kenan Song. Alex Morono, he has a jiu-jitsu game, can throw hands as well. This fight is expected to go to a decision. Taking on Zack Otto. Zack Otto is coming in at plus 165, fighting out of Milwaukee, 32 years old. This is Zack Otto we're talking about. He's coming off of the, how do you want to call it, the win over Dwight Grant. Dwight Grant was not pulling the trigger. Very ugly fight. Looked impressive against Sage Northcutt early, but faded pretty quickly. And then is coming off of the knockout win over Mike Pyle. This fight takes place in the welterweight division. I think you could find better options than Alex Morono here. Zack Otto, I've seen a few folks on him in the MMA betting community. I don't put a lot of faith in Zack Otto. I think we'll see Alex Morono use his striking here, stay at range, and piece up Zack Otto. I do think Morono is going to come out with the victory, but I don't think he's going to pay off his $9,100 price tag. Next up, we have an interesting fight at the men's 135-pound division. Luis Smolka against Matt Danger Schnell. Schnell coming in at plus 110. We've seen a little bit of love for Smolka. I have a feeling in Draftkings he might be one of the higher-owned fighters due to Smolka's scrambling ability. He has the ability to finish, but I am concerned where Smolka's head's at. I know he quit drinking, but but he seems to be overpowered in the grappling department often in many of his fights. And what saved him is his scrambling and him coming out the back door, finding the back of folks. He's got a guillotine. He has a decent jiu-jitsu game. If this fight does end, I expect it to end by submission for Smolka, but I could see Schnell pulling off a decision victory. Very hard to get Smolka out of there as a Hawaiian. Schnell 7,900, Smolka 8,300. This fight may end up on an optimal lineup. I have a feeling we're going to see high ownership of Smolka, but be careful what you wish for, because we've seen Smolka shit the bed before. Next up, we have Maurice Greene against Jeff Hughes. Maurice Greene coming in on short notice. Did not look good on the scales at all. We know he's a big heavyweight, but we've seen these guys also fight once before. We saw Jeff Hughes use his wrestling to pull out the victory. Jeff Hughes coming in at -225, very highly priced on Draftkings. I suspect we'll see a lot of Jeff Hughes in cash lineups. This fight is expected to go to a decision, though, at -125. Maurice Greene, he's a low output fighter. He is not somebody I can trust at 6,900. I think there are better options at the low end of the spectrum for DraftKings. So I'm going to pick Jeff Hughes to implement his wrestling and coast here in a slow, sloppy heavyweight fight. Next up, we have in the men's 145-pound division, interesting fight where we should get a lot of questions answered. Dawson sitting at -175, opened at a as a heavier favorite, taking on Julian Rosa. Rosa coming in at +165. Julian Rosa 7,500, priced at DraftKings. And then you have Grant Dawson at 8,700. Grant Dawson, for me, he's a GPP play. This is a kid who was popped for the same stuff as our good friend John Jones, but he he doesn't have the same legal team as Jones, but he was able to push that off, and he lost some significant time to his fighting career. Grant Dawson, this is a kid who I was reading that he had an offer to wrestle at Nebraska and turned it down. He's taking on a grizzled veteran in Rosa. Rosa says all the right things in interviews, but when it comes to fight night, he's been dropped a number of times in his fights. I see this fight playing out with Dawson closing the distance, staying in Rosa's face, making this ugly, getting the fight to the ground, landing hopefully multiple takedowns. I like Dawson in this fight, but this is one of those fights that I think you're going to have to talk some Dawson lineups in there, because it's not expected to go the distance. Sitting at -205 right now, not to go the distance. Rosa, though, he has pretty good hands, and he has a will to win. It's just his chin lets him down. So I think it's a risky play with Dawson, but you have to take risks if you want to win some money in DraftKings. I'm curious to see what kind of ownership we're going to see on Dawson, though. Next up, we have Yana Kunitskaya against Marion Renault in the women's 135-pound division. Marion Renault getting up there in age. She's one of the older female fighters on the roster. She is coming in at 7,300 on DraftKings and sitting at a +168 underdog. Kunitskaya sitting at -180 right now at 8,900. Kunitskaya, the younger fighter, has solid stand-up. She's going to be the much larger fighter. This fight is expected to go to a decision. I think we're going to see Kunitskaya trying to stay at distance, landing the jab, and it's going to be up to Renault. You know, she's going to have to bust her ass to get this fight to the ground, where she has a significant advantage, but how is she going to get it there? You can't rely on Renault winning a fight off of her back. I don't see the output that I want from Renault at 7,300, so I'm going to be avoiding her. But I wouldn't be surprised if Renault was able to get a submission off her back late in the fight. Kunitskaya, nobody looks good against Cyborg unless you're Amanda Nunes. So that fight is totally irrelevant when you're talking competition. But I think Kunitskaya, I would pick her to win a low-scoring decision from a DraftKings perspective. Next up, we have Anthony Rocco Martin against Sergio Moraes. This fight is at the men's welterweight division. Anthony Martin coming in at 15-4. He's been surging lately. 9,200. That's a very high price to pay for DraftKings. The Vegas says this is going to a decision. Sitting at -140 right now. Sergio Moraes likes to bang, but also has a great ground game. Made easy work of Ben Saunders, but this isn't Ben Saunders he's fighting. Sergio Moraes. Also, I mean, say what you want about the fight against Tim Means. He actually looked pretty good against him. Did look at times that he was going to gas out. Moraes, if this fight does go to the ground, of course, I do think he has a significant advantage, but Anthony Martin is going to try to stay at distance, land the straight punches, and I think he's going to do that. I know at the betting line, -205 right now is a pretty high price to pay. But this is another fight on the high end that I'll be avoiding from a DraftKings perspective. But I do think he is one of the safer plays from a wagering perspective. Anthony Martin, I'm going to pick him to win here. I actually see him staying at distance and pulling off a decision victory. Next up, we have in the men's middleweight division, Omari Akhmedov against Tim Boetsch. Tim, the Barbarian Boetsch, 38 years old. Got to see him lose to Jacare. We saw him get run through by Antonio Carlos Jr. Tim Boetsch has one foot out the door for a while. We've seen him riding around on his tractor, has a lawn care business. Tim Boetsch, 7,700. Akhmedov might not be the most exciting fighter, but this fight is expected not to go to a decision at -215. Akhmedov, 31 years of age. He really has filled out at middleweight. Akhmedov has been in there with some tough competition as well. I mean, he lost to Gunnar Nelson. He's been in there with Zaleski dos Santos. He's been in there with Sergio Moraes. This fight, if it lasts, I think Boetsch is going to falter late. So I'm going to go with Akhmedov here to win inside of the distance, but late in the second or third round. 8,500 for Akhmedov. I think he's going to be one of the lower-owned fighters, even though this fight is expected not to go to a decision. But I'm looking forward to see what ownership says. Here's a great fight. Men's lightweight division. We've got Benny Dariush at -190 on the betting line, 9,000 from a DraftKings perspective, taking on Drew Dober. Drew Dober, a very durable fighter, at 7,200 plus 175 on the betting line. This fight is expected to go to a decision at -150. Dariush, he's coming off of a decision win, but prior to that was knocked out, brutally knocked out a couple of times. He has talked about considering retirement. He had some conversations with God and found that he should continue. He has some great skills. Dober, I think he's still on the rise, man. He's a huge lightweight. Dariush is going to come in looking to grapple. He's not going to – I know he has decent stand-up, but the safe play for him is to get this fight to the ground where he has a big advantage. The problem is if you are on Drew Dober, that will stifle Dober's output, and Dober's going to really have to do a lot of hard work to separate and land strikes. So Dariush could win this fight by submission. We've seen Drew Dober submitted a couple of times in the past. Drew Dober trains with Justin Gaethje in Colorado. He's been busting his ass. I actually am going to have a lot of Drew Dober in Draftkings today. I know it may cost me, but I also am a huge fan of Benny Dariush. That loss to Alex Hernandez really was tough to watch because I really felt that he was on the rise. He was winning the fight against Barbosa as well until he ate that huge knee. So I know a lot of people are saying Dober, the only way he can win is by finishing Dariush. That may happen, but I think Dober is a live dog here. Looking forward to this fight too. So from a DraftKings perspective, I see Dariush could pay off his price tag in GPPs. I will be staying away from him in cash lineups, but I understand why he's a -190 favorite. I just I'm a believer in Drew Dober. Not so much that I would place a wager on him, but I believe that he's one of the dogs who may come through. And this fight is expected to go to a decision. Next up, we have in the heavyweight division, massive heavyweight in Ben Rothwell, who's coming off of a USADA suspension, taking out Ivanov. We saw him against Dos Santos recently. Both of these fighters are older, grizzled vets. Ben Rothwell, I watched him submit Josh Barnett live, and that was a surprise to some folks. But Rothwell has a great submission game. He can throw hands. He's a tough guy. Man, he's been in there with some – I remember when Kane was teeing off on him, and he just would not go away. He's like a giant zombie. This fight is not expected to go to a decision at -140. I think, to be honest, that Rothwell should be the favorite here, but I understand the question marks. I think you are getting a little bit of a deal at 7,800 on DraftKings. Ivanov, I know on the I'm not in mixed martial arts, but he does have a grappling victory over I believe in Sambo over the great Fedor Emelianenko. But I'm going to go with Ben Rothwell here at +100. I think he. I mean, you are taking some risks. The guy's been out of the game for a while. He probably doesn't have a gas tank, but this could be a sloppy fight. There's a giant size discrepancy here, big reach discrepancy, and in those pre-fight interviews, I know he's receiving a lot of hate, but I also see someone who's extremely motivated as somebody who wants to prove a point. So sometimes tough to get a good read on Ben Rothwell, but I know he's getting up there, but I'm going to roll with Ben Rothwell here, fading Ivanov. Next up, we have a hotly contested fight. In the men's welterweight division, we have Nico Price against Tim Means. Tim Means sitting right now at -185 on the betting line, taking on Nico Price, who's sitting at +170. This fight should not go to a decision. Fight doesn't go the distance at -205. Nico Price typically comes in with a sense of urgency. Nico Price, man, he is sitting at 7,400 in DraftKings. Tim Means was up to, he was hovering at -200. Tim Means, I'm a big fan of the Dirty Bird. I think we are going to see Tim Means come in here and piece Nico Price up on the feet. Nico Price, something that concerned me, he's trying something new. He's coming in about 13 pounds lighter than he usually does. He was in at about, he said on media day, 173 pounds. Last year, he came in at 186 pounds. He looked a little bit smaller on the scales. He has a interesting physique, almost like Phil Davis. Nico Price, very good ground game. I believe he's a brown belt. If he does find Tim Means' back, I'm very concerned. But Tim Means, he knows what he's dealing with here. It wouldn't surprise me if Nico Price won by submission. But I also, you look at Nico's last few fights, Vicente Luque tore him apart. Alex Morono was piecing him up on the feet, and we've seen Abdul Razak Al Hassan brutally knock out Nico Price. I really think Tim Means, if he sticks to his game plan, stays focused, Nico Price will be there to be had. I think that Nico Price, or that Tim Means is going to put up. He'll meet expectations at 8,800 on DraftKings. He's my most confident play on the card. But that being said, you want high upside. Nico Price may be one of the highest upside plays, other than Derrick Lewis. If Derrick Lewis comes through, then you know, you get 6,800. If Derrick Lewis lands that brutal knockout, then he'll pay off that 6,800 price tag. But Tim Means, he has a few ways he can win this fight. I see him winning inside the distance. But great fight. Next up, co-main event, we have Curtis Melander against our friend Zaleski Dos Santos. Dos Santos, I got to see him fight Lyman Good a couple years ago. Tough guy to finish. He's got a jiu-jitsu game. He's got this is a guy who really, you talk about a will to win. He's in the fight. He will not go away. At plus 100, I like him as a underdog play. Curtis Melander wants to stay at distance. He's a minus 110 favorite. He's at 8,200 on the DraftKings board. Zaleski's gonna come towards Melander. Now it's up to Curtis to keep him at bay. Want to see if he's able to get that done. This fight, interesting odds. This fight is actually, I was surprised that I thought this fight would be expected to not go the distance. It looks like it's now, people are smartening up and it's headed that way. But Zaleski, we see, I mean, he tried to take Lyman Good down early. It's tough to look good against some of the fighters that he's looked good against. I mean, he's against Griffin, against Strickland. He's going to bring the fight to Melander. Zaleski is going to be my underdog pick. The problem is Zaleski may be one of the highest priced fighters on DraftKings. So be aware. Be aware. Melander, if somehow he's able to get a finish here, he may be a sneaky GPP play. I don't think we're going to see a high ownership on Melander. So the other thing is Curtis Melander is he's 17-3. This is a winner. So Zaleski's going to have to bring his A game, which he does, and there's going to be a firefight to be had. So I'm going to my pick here is Zaleski though. Now we've got a heavyweight tilt. I'm going to try to get this done in 2 minutes, but we got a heavyweight tilt between Derrick Lewis and Junior Dos Santos. Junior Dos Santos, a lot of people wrote him off a few years ago, and he's had a resurgence. Dos Santos, 9,400 from DraftKings perspective. 20-5 record. Aging heavyweight with, some may say, a suspect chin. But he's had his lights turned out by some heavy punchers. Derrick Lewis, 6,800, 21-6 record, coming off of fight against Daniel Cormier. Was at that fight for the belt. Daniel Cormier, he made easy work of Derrick Lewis. Junior Dos Santos is going to look to stay on the feet, use his great footwork and hands to take out Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis, I think a lot of the damage is starting to take a toll on him. In the third, fourth, and fifth round, we're probably going to see Derrick Lewis slumped over. If it gets that far, Junior Dos Santos is going to work the body. He's going to be landing jabs. He's going to be dancing around. Derrick Lewis is going to really have to push the pace and put himself in vulnerable positions. That's the way Derrick Lewis wins this fight. Junior Dos Santos, he is, you know, it's a risky play. Minus 195 for Dos Santos, but there are levels to this game. Derrick Lewis is not a top-tier fighter. If Junior Dos Santos had a chin, he would be fighting for a title again, but he doesn't, and he's content. We saw him last out against Ivanov. You know, he danced around at distance and was content with a decision victory. So that may be the case in this spot. So I don't hate on the decision play, but here's the problem: Derrick Lewis doesn't have the footwork to stay away from Dos Santos. He's going to be moving forward. He's going to be throwing high kicks. He's going to be throwing heavy punches. And I think Dos Santos is going to land at high volume here, especially third, fourth, and fifth round. And I do see him paying off his price tag, that $9,400 price tag. Another thing is I think we're going to see a lot of people on Dos Santos. Sorry, a lot of people on Lewis in DraftKings at 6,800. He may hang in the fight for a while, so that's something to consider. If Lewis puts up 25, 30 points at 6,800 and opens up a lot of options for your roster, and you have 5 other winners, that could put you in the money. So take your chances. I'm going to pick Dos Santos here. Great fights. I try to be optimistic and look at the bright side of every card. So we've got an early start here, early finish. I believe the main event kicks off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Want to wish everybody great luck in their contests today. I'll see you in the trenches. You can follow me on betmma.tips as well as CapperTech, Mike's MMA picks, quick card breakdown on fight morning. Oh, my little buddy is going to say goodbye. Say bye, Cody. Bye. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the card.